Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Poetry RX, How 50 Inspiring Poems Can Heal and Bring Joy to Your Life, by Norman E. Rosenthal, M.D. Narrated by Marguerite, Gavin, and Sean Pratt.
Introduction. You may well wonder how I, a psychiatrist with no formal literary credentials, have chosen to write about the power of poetry to heal, inspire, and bring joy to people. It all started with a single phone call that came in late one night. The caller was my friend Dave, and I knew immediately by the tone of his voice that something was wrong. He choked up as he told me that he had recently lost someone very dear to him. "How can I go on?" he mused. "How will I manage?" Clichés and generalities readily come to mind in such situations, but I searched for something specific to say, something that might actually help. Recognizing that David is a person steeped in the arts, I said, "There is an art to losing, and like all art, it can be developed." He was silent for a while, and when he spoke again, his voice sounded more cheerful, as though he had tapped into some hidden source of hope. "Do you know the poem One Art by Elizabeth Bishop?" he asked. I told him no. "Well, let me read it to you." And he began, "The art of losing isn't hard to master." As he read on, his voice gathered strength and energy with each stanza. Afterwards, his mood was lighter, and, strangely, so was mine. Can a poem really help a grieving person? I wondered. And, if so, might other poems also have healing powers? I marveled also at how David had reached into the depths of his grief and presented me with a gift, a poem that offered me a fresh perspective on how to help someone out of the darkness that can engulf you when you lose someone you love. I shared the poem with patients and friends, many of whom found comfort in its words, and looked for other poems that might have similar effects. Once I started looking, I found such poems everywhere. One friend, a therapist, had been so moved by a poem about aging by Wendell Berry that she had given copies of it to patients. It's in Chapter 46 in this collection. I bolstered my promising findings with internet reports of comfort and relief in response to particular poems. The idea of this book is that poetry can not only inspire and delight, but can actually help you feel better, soothe your pain, and heal psychological wounds. In short, as the book's title suggests, poetry can act as a kind of medicine. Although all literature can console, there is something about great poetry, its rhythms and cadences, its conciseness and brilliance, that has a power and charm all its own. One way in which poetry exerts its effect is that it is easier to remember, recall, and reproduce at will. We can, at a moment's notice, dip into our memory and conjure up Wordsworth's daffodils or Keats's nightingale. The poems. The 50 gem-like poems in this collection have all stood the test of time and appear in published anthologies. They are relatively short, most fitting on a single page. In their conciseness, they deliver their messages in the most efficient, effective, and beautiful way possible. Friends, patients, and I have all enjoyed and benefited from some or all of these verses. I hope you might find the same healing power and joy from them as we have. The collection is divided into 5 sections, each covering an area important for a good and happy life. 1. Loving and losing. 2. Responses to nature. 3. Aspects of the human experience. 4. A design for living and the search for meaning. And 5. The last phase of life. How to get the most out of a poem. Although reading a poem seems like a very straightforward activity, it can be greatly enriched by a few simple tricks. 1. remember to enjoy the poem. It should be fun, not work. Actively engage with the poem. Give it your full attention, and it will reward you. 2. Read it aloud. That way you can enjoy the music and the words. Also, vocalizing the words involves different sets of nerves and muscles and different parts of the brain compared to reading it silently. Therefore, it will create a different experience. But most importantly, reading a poem aloud deepens its therapeutic potential. 3. Read the poem more than once. One mysterious aspect of a poem is how successive readings reveal new layers of meaning. How strange. After all, the lines are right there on the page. When you read them the first time, they may seem perfectly clear. How, then, can they still yield new insights and rewards when you revisit them? Try it and see for yourself. 4. Experience the poem with all of your senses. A poem is no more a purely intellectual experience than a song or a painting or a spoonful of ice cream. For an example of a poem that engages all your senses, look at Sea Fever, Chapter 23. 5. As the reader, you complete the poem, in the process bringing your past experiences into the collaboration between you and the poet. At the moment of completion, it may feel as if the pieces of a puzzle are falling together. You may delight in the aha moment as you think, so that's what the poem meant. Allow yourself to experience the wonder a poem provides when it opens up new spaces in which your mind can roam. 6. Listen to others reading the poem. Many of the poems in this collection are read aloud online by talented men and women and can be found on the internet. One outstanding example is the sonnet, Pity Me Not Because the Light of Day, Chapter 3, which is beautifully read by its author, Edna St. Vincent Millay. Neuroscientist Eugen Vasilevsky and colleagues at the Max Planck Institute in Frankfurt have found that reciting poetry can be a powerful stimulus for eliciting peak emotional responses, such as chills and goosebumps, by activating the brain's reward circuitry. 7. Tolerate and even savor ambiguity of feeling and thought. Be intrigued by what you don't immediately understand. There is such a thing as creative reading as well as creative writing. Often in poems, circuits are not completed. Ideas are left unfinished or equivocal. This is not accidental. The unfinished business may serve as a focus of continued puzzlement, a brain teaser lingering in the mind, begging for a solution. Some experimental data suggest that people remember unfinished or interrupted tasks better than completed ones, the so-called Zeigarnik effect. So it may be that by presenting the reader with unfinished ideas, the poet creates a more memorable and indelible work. And 8. Pay attention to details. Punctuation, the separation of lines, their placement on the page, form, rhythm, and rhyme, as well as the white space that helps give the poem its shape, may all be part of what the poet is trying to communicate. Remember, when reading a poem, it is your interpretation, rather than mine or anyone else's, that is most important. As Dee Snider, from the band Twisted Sister, said, "The beauty of literature, poetry, and music is that they leave room for the audience to put its own imagination, experiences, and dreams into the words." So, any interpretations I offer are mine alone. I encourage you to differ. And most of all, have fun engaging with these beautiful and ingenious creations. Part 1. Loving and Losing. 'Tis better to have loved and lost than never to have loved at all. Alfred Lord Tennyson.
Chapter 1. Is there an art to losing? One Art, by Elizabeth Bishop. The art of losing isn't hard to master. So many things seem filled with the intent to be lost that their loss is no disaster. Lose something every day, except the fluster of lost door keys, the hour badly spent. The art of losing isn't hard to master. Then practice losing farther, losing faster. Places and names and where it was you meant to travel. None of these will bring disaster. I lost my mother's watch. And look, my last, or next to last, of 3 loved houses went. The art of losing isn't hard to master. I lost 2 cities, lovely ones, and vaster, some realms I owned, 2 rivers, a continent. I missed them, but it wasn't a disaster. Even losing you, the joking voice, a gesture I love, I shan't have lied. It's evident the art of losing's not too hard to master, though it may look like, write it, like disaster.
In One Art, Elizabeth Bishop teaches about loss with examples from her own life. Starting with small everyday losses familiar to all of us, she suggests that loss is a normal part of life. Then she ups the ante as her losses get progressively bigger. Repeatedly, she assures us that the art of losing isn't hard to master. But as her losses mount, we marvel at her stoicism, and may even ask whether she is merely putting on a brave face when she writes, "I lost 2 cities, lovely ones, and vaster, some realms I owned, 2 rivers, a continent." Add that to 3 lost houses, and I can hear someone asking, is she for real? That's a lot of stuff to lose. How come it's no disaster? At the end of the poem, we find out what she has been holding back through the first 5 verses. The poem is not only directed to readers, but primarily to a lost loved one, which puts us in the role of an eavesdropper, listening in on an intimate communication to a former lover. For the first time in the poem, we feel Bishop's pain as she writes, "The joking voice, a gesture I love." When the poet says, "I shan't have lied," she fails to convince, because we realize that although losing may be an art, it can sometimes be a very hard one to master, and it may truly feel like a disaster. In her grief, Bishop has written a masterpiece that is a gift for anyone seeking solace from the pain of loss. No wonder that it cheered up my friend on that sad day when he called me grief-stricken from the loss of a loved one. And no wonder that the poem has provided comfort to so many people with whom I have shared it. The Biology of Loss. Bishop's reassurance that we are capable of enduring severe losses is well grounded in the history of our species, which has been biologically programmed to withstand the death of infants, older children, parents, siblings, and friends. As you listen to the biographical sketches of the poets in this book, you may be astonished to see how many of them, Bishop included, were orphaned at a young age, lost siblings, or outlived their own children. Despite our inbuilt survival mechanisms, losses may have serious psychological consequences. Pioneering psychiatrist John Bowlby developed a theory of attachment and loss based on his observations of children in war-torn London in the middle of the last century, particularly those wrenched from parental figures at a young age. Since then, the problems of early loss, notably depression and difficulties with attachment in later life, have been extensively documented and studied. One art is a type of poem called a villanelle. The villanelle is distinguished by the following. 1. It has 19 lines. 2. There are 5 stanzas of 3 lines each, known as tercets, followed by 1 4-line stanza, known as a quatrain. 3. There are 2 key lines that repeat at prescribed intervals. 4. There is an alternate rhyming scheme. And 5. The meter is typically iambic pentameter, 5 feet, in which each foot has an unstressed followed by a stressed syllable, as in da-dum, 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 da-dum. This is the most common meter in English poetry, and resembles the sound of the human heartbeat, lub-dub. Two other villanelles in this collection are The Waking, chapter 39, and Do Not Go Gentle, chapter 48. Takeaways. 1. There is an art to losing. Like all skills, the ability to survive loss may improve with experience, a fact that may offer comfort when loss occurs. 2. Accept the loss. Acceptance of suffering is fundamental to dealing with all types of adversity. In general, acceptance of suffering lessens its pain, just as denial of suffering amplifies it. You will see this general principle arise with regard to other poems in this collection, as it does in life. The value of acceptance is perhaps best expressed in the famous Serenity Prayer, attributed to theologian Reinhold Niebuhr, which reads in part, God, give me the grace to accept with serenity the things that cannot be changed. 3. Beware of all or none thinking. This type of thinking has been classified as one form of cognitive distortion which can contribute to depression and other negative mood states. Confronting and correcting cognitive distortions can help people feel better. When people engage in all or none thinking, they gravitate towards extremes. For example, that something either is or is not a disaster. This may cause emotional problems, such as depression in the former case, or denial in the latter. When you encounter adversity, including the loss of a loved one, it may be neither a disaster nor easy, but something in between, as the poet finally concludes. And 4. Write it down. Bishop's advice to herself to write down her thoughts and feelings is in line with modern science. Writing down your deepest thoughts and feelings can be therapeutic and instrumental in recovery from trauma. James Pennebaker, professor of psychology at the University of Texas in Austin, pioneered this line of work, which has revealed many physical and psychological benefits that can accrue from such writing exercises.
The Poet and the Poem. Elizabeth Bishop, 1911 to 1979, was born in Worcester, Massachusetts, to Gertrude Bulmer and William Thomas Bishop, owners of the J.W. Bishop contracting firm. She learned the art of losing early in life. Her father died when she was only 8 months old. Her mother, who spent the next 5 years in and out of psychiatric hospitals, was then permanently committed, and Bishop never saw her again. After her mother's hospitalization, Bishop was raised at first by her mother's loving and comforting family in Nova Scotia. Later she was moved, unconsulted and against my wishes, to stay with her paternal grandparents. Of her time with them, she wrote, I felt myself aging, even dying. I was bored and lonely with Grandma, my silent grandpa, the dinners alone. At night I lay blinking my flashlight off and on, and crying. In 1918 she was rescued by her mother's sister, who lived in a happier home in South Boston. Years later she confided to her friend and fellow poet Robert Lowell, When you write my epitaph, you must say I was the loneliest person who ever lived. Bishop was a sickly child, so before age 14 her education was limited, but she became an excellent student and was accepted into Vassar College. She won an important fellowship from the college and an award from the American Academy of Arts and Letters, which enabled her to travel to Brazil. There she developed a serious allergy, and as she recovered, she fell in love with her friend and nurse, Loda de Meseda Suarez. She and Loda lived together for 15 years, during which she wrote to Lowell that she was extremely happy for the first time in my life. Both women suffered from physical and psychological distress and were hospitalized in Brazil. On recovery, Bishop left for New York. Suarez followed later, but on the day she arrived in New York, she took an overdose of tranquilizers and died. Bishop returned to the U.S. to teach at Harvard, where she met Alice Meatfessel, a much younger woman who was to become a source of strength and love for the rest of her life. One art was addressed to Alice at a time when it seemed that the relationship was over, because Alice was planning to get married. She changed her mind, however, and returned. Bishop suffered from alcoholism, which afflicted her for many years, and drug abuse. She took stimulants during the day and sleeping pills at night, along with antabuse, a drug used to treat alcoholism, in an attempt to remain sober. Alice stayed with Bishop till the latter's death from a brain aneurysm 18 months later. Through all her difficulties, Bishop remained productive. She received multiple honors, including the Pulitzer Prize for Poetry in 1956 and the National Book Award for Poetry in 1970. She is regarded as one of the greatest modern poets. One Art, which went through 17 drafts before publication, is her most famous poem. Chapter 2. Can Love Transform You? How Do I Love Thee? Let Me Count the Ways, by Elizabeth Barrett Browning. How do I love thee? Let me count the ways. I love thee to the depth and breadth and height my soul can reach when feeling out of sight for the ends of being and ideal grace. I love thee to the level of every day's most quiet need, by sun and candlelight. I love thee freely, as men strive for right. I love thee purely, as they turn from praise. I love thee with the passion put to use in my old griefs and with my childhood's faith. I love thee with the love I seem to lose with my lost saints. I love thee with the breath, smiles, tears of all my life. And, if God choose, I shall but love thee better after death.
How do I love thee? These 5 small words, clustered together this way, are among the best known in English literature. The phrase that follows, "Let me count the ways," as famous as the first, has provided titles for songs, books, and TV episodes. What about this poem has led to such immortality? And who was its author? This poem is a sonnet written in the tradition of the famous 14th century Italian poet Francesco Petrarch. The sonnet form is versatile, used by many poets in this collection. One of my patients, Rusty, a computer engineer in his mid-40s, reported that his wife complained that he was not expressive enough in telling her he loved her. "I do tell her I love her," he protested. "What else does she expect me to say?" I referred him to Browning's famous sonnet for inspiration. In asking, "How do I love thee?" Elizabeth Barrett Browning frames the subject of her love in a novel way. She examines and expresses her own feelings towards her beloved. This is an inversion of a common preoccupation of people in love. Do they love me or not, and if so, how much? These questions reflect the insecurity and romantic uncertainty of the questioner. In contrast, Barrett Browning examines her own feelings, and in so doing, provides a beautiful description of profound love. The Petrarchan Sonnet contains the following. 1. It is named for the great Italian poet, Petrarch. 2. It has 14 lines, a property shared by all sonnets. 3. There is a miniature story, with a beginning, a middle, and an end. 4. It is divided into an octet, or 8 lines, and a sestet, or 6 lines. 5. The octet, the beginning, raises a question or problem. 6. Then comes the volta, the middle, a shift in topic. 7. Finally, the sestet, the end, provides a resolution. 8. The meter is typically iambic pentameter. And 9. The rhyme scheme for the octet is A, B, B, A, C, D, D, C. For the sestet, E, F, E, F, E, F, with some variability. In the first 8 lines, octet of the sonnet, the poet is anchored in the present. She starts her inventory as one might measure some concrete object, its depth, breadth, and height, but soon realizes that her love is so vast as to be out of sight and immeasurable. She then shifts her frame of reference and compares her love to Every Day's Most Quiet Need by Sun and Candlelight. Her love is not just an entertainment or embellishment to her life. Rather, it is a fundamental need. Like other needs that, though crucial, can easily be overlooked because they are most quiet, such as air, water, and the internal space necessary for contemplation. In the last two lines of the octet, the poet expresses two qualities she has observed in men she admires. They strive for right and turn from praise. It is with the same free and pure spirit that the poet embraces her love. To the modern reader, these qualities may seem quaint or out of date. I recently asked a graduate student what she was looking for in a partner. She responded with a smile, "Everything, just like everybody else. I want someone who is attractive, fun, adventurous, and sociable. Someone who wants to travel and is good in bed." There was no mention of striving for right or turning from praise. Elements of character were not on the menu. There is much that the modern woman or man can learn from this famous poem. At the twist, Volta, the poet shifts from the present to her less happy past. She refers to my old griefs and writes, I love thee with a love I seemed to lose, with my lost saints. Her relationship has helped her reconnect with those early wellsprings of love, allowing her to experience love with the breath, smiles, tears of all my life. In her final line, the poet may be suggesting that she will continue to love him in the afterlife, or that if her husband, the poet Robert Browning, to whom the poem is addressed, dies before she does, her love will continue after he passes away. We will return to this theme of continuing to love people even after they die in Remember, Chapter 14, and Do Not Stand at My Grave and Weep, Chapter 50. Takeaways. 1. Consider words as a love language. In his book, The 5 Love Languages, author Gary Chapman suggests 5 different ways in which love can be expressed. 1. Quality time. 2. Gifts. 3. Acts of service. 4. Physical touch. And 5. Expressions of love. He points out that different people appreciate these forms to different degrees, which is useful for couples to remember if they are to enjoy a loving relationship. For those relationships where words of love are appreciated by one or both parties, Barrett Browning's famous sonnet may offer some helpful insights. People in relationships often assume that their partners know how they are feeling, or, more commonly, they don't give the matter enough thought. As a result, the other person can feel misunderstood, neglected, or taken for granted. In my work with couples, as misunderstandings are clarified, I often hear, "Why didn't you tell me? I'm not a mind reader." With the help of therapy or experience, it is possible to move this question into the present tense, as in, please tell me what's on your mind and skip the mind reader part, which contains an element of sarcasm. 2. Put feelings into words. For Rusty, the computer engineer at the start of the chapter, his difficulty in expressing love was just part of his difficulty in understanding his feelings in general and putting them into words, a problem called alexithymia. Often, bodily sensations can provide useful clues to emotions. Pioneering psychologist William James brought this idea to general attention in a famous essay entitled, What is an Emotion? If you see a bear in the woods, James suggested, you run first, then feel afraid. Your body leads your emotions. Likewise, if you see an attractive person, your heart may flutter before you can find words to express your attraction. Putting emotions into words can advance a relationship. For anybody who has difficulty verbalizing feelings, How Do I Love Thee may be a resource. With some help, Rusty has now found new ways to let his wife know how he loves her, and the couple is thriving. Even those of us without alexithymia may be able to do better at recognizing and communicating our love and appreciation to those who are important to us, It is so simple to offer words of kindness and appreciation, yet so easy to forget in our business.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?